Well, good morning. If y'all will take your seats, we'll get started. Thank y'all for coming, and the individual legislators that are here. We're in uh, District 128 this morning, and the co-chairman is Mac Jackson. And Mac, I'm gonna turn it over to you since we're in your territory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We want to thank each and every one of you for coming, for being here today. As co-chair of the Rural Development Council, I'm proud, along with co-chair Representative Gerald Green, to welcome you to District 128, a district whose heart screams, thank you for coming to rural Georgia. You know, growing up in a small town, everyone knows that those who have led before us and whose shoulders we stand on as a thriving rural community are the ones who deserve a heartfelt thank you. For Thompson, such a family is the Knox family. Bob Knox is what Thompson folk call a Thompsonite, born here, raised here, and as most good Thompson High School graduates do, go to the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. And as fate would have it, as someone committed to his hometown, Bob came back to Thompson to practice law and begin his lifelong career in public service. So we fast forward to the day he met his wife, Dot Meadows. The history of Thompson and the state of Georgia was tremendously changed forever, improved with a legacy for shepherding strong community leaders. We're honored this morning to have so many of the Knox and Meadows family with us. Would you just come up front for a minute, please, the Meadows family? Because of our short time, I won't read the whole resolution, but I'm going to give them the section. Thank you. Here's another one here for you all. And I think our friend, Rebecca Rao, has some more topics for the family. If you want to say a few words, you're welcome.
I hope it's okay if I read that, if you don't mind. I'm Dottie Knox Thomas. I live here in Thompson, and I'm Dot and Bob's youngest daughter. So on behalf of my sisters and my extended family, I just want to say to Representative Jackson, thank you so much for proposing these and to the House for adopting them. My mom and my dad were born and bred small town folk, and they loved their community, and they were stalwarts in unifying people and doing the best to make our community the best that it can be. And my family and I want to continue that tradition and use their memory to continue the good work. And so we just thank y'all for all you do for rural communities, and know that we're going to keep doing our best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mike Chairman Green to open up with prayer.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, once again we come before Thee, asking for Thy blessings, asking for Thy guidance. And Lord, we just thank You for the individuals that have gathered here today to look at the issues that is facing rural Georgia and Georgia in the whole. And Father, we just pray that good outcomes will come from this. And Lord, we just I ask You to bless the presenters, bless those individuals that have traveled here. Be with us and guide us and direct us. And Father, know that we love You and know that we are Your servants. And Father, we ask You to be with us now and guide us and direct us in all things. Amen.
Thank you, Chairman Green. We're going to ask the Mayor of Thompson, Mayor Benjamin Gary Cranford Jr. to come up front and greet us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank y'all for picking Thompson to come have y'all's meeting, and we're glad to have y'all. Glad to meet y'all. Thank y'all.
office. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for greeting us today. Chairman Green, you want to go on into the program now?
Well, I thought yes, thank you. We'd ask each one of the members to introduce themselves that have come to Thompson here. We'll start with our distinguished chairman of Economic Development and Tourism.
I represent Savannah and a large portion of Bryan County, the largest, fastest growing county in the state.
Good morning. I'm Butch Parrish. I live down in Swainsboro. I chair the Health Committee and on Special Health Committee and also the Rules Committee. And glad to be here with you. And thank you for the good work your rural development council meeting is doing. Thank you.
My name is Lee Hawkins. I represent Hall County and part of Lumpkin County. I'm actually not on this committee, but wanted to come down and see what was going on. I chair the Little Health Committee under my boss right here, and always interested in health, whether it be in large cities, small towns, wherever it is.
I'm Al Williams. I'm from Midway. I represent Liberty County, and it's a pleasure to be here. This has been one of the greatest openings I've ever spent. I'm looking for a good fox horse to purchase to come back in November. I look forward to it.
Tatnall, Evans, Appling, and Jeff Davis counties, chair of industry and labor, and this is it.
John Corbett, District 174, represent Lowndes, Eccles, Clinch, Ware, Charlton, and Brantley counties in South Georgia. Glad to be here today, chair of the Motor Vehicles Committee, and look forward to the presentation.
I'm Gerald Green. I'm the co-chair of this committee and also the chair of the State Properties Committee, serving Southwest Georgia, 9 counties down in that area in District 154. And while I have the mic, I want to thank the members that showed up last night for a spectacular event. Everything was done so well last night, and we really appreciate the hospitality afforded us on the fox hunt and the food, and we just had a grand time, and that was the way to start off a good day. Thank y'all so much for that.
I'm Mac Jackson from Sandersville. This is my district in Thompson in District 128. And I want to say too, thank you to everyone who made the dinner last night possible. We were at Bell Meat Hunt. Al Williams has already gotten his red jacket made to come back. So I hope he get the boots too, Leo, that come up to his thing. But I want to thank Scott Ferguson for making sure that everything was set up for us, and Piedmont Hospitals for providing dinner for us on last night. Also want to thank Leo and Stacy for the work that they do on this council, because without Leo and Stacy, Gerald and I know we couldn't do what we do without the two of them making it possible. So thank you for everything.
Good morning. I'm Bill Yerta, District 152. I'm from Sylvester and represent Worth, Lee, and a portion of Daugherty County. It's great to be with you here in Thompson and McDuffie County. You've got a beautiful community and just a lot of history here, and just great to be with you today.
I'm Representative Darlene Taylor from Thomasville. I represent District 173, and I serve as the chairman of appropriations for just healthcare. Happy to be here. And thank you again for the hospitality. It is wonderful, and I love the rural communities. Thank you.
We also have Stuart Morelli. Stuart is our legal counsel. He answers all our hard questions here. And then we have our group from the Capitol over here that are the part of the media, and they'll be working through this process of making sure that the broadcast goes out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mac, and we'll have our first introduction here.
Our first introduction is the Rural Health Innovation Center, Kedrick Williams. And would you introduce your staff with you?
Good morning. I am Dr. Kedrick Williams. I serve as Senior Rural Health Project Manager at the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center at Mercer University School of Medicine. And I am privileged to be here on behalf of our Executive Director, Mrs. Glenda Grant, who sends her best regards, and our very own Dean Sumner, the visionary of our center and Mercer School of Medicine. I stand to present on addressing Georgia's rural health challenges in maternal health. Though many of you may already be aware of who we are, I just stand also to share with you some information about the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center. In 2018, Mercer University was awarded grant funding from the state of Georgia and established the center on its Macon campus. The center focuses on the development of research programs, analyzes significant health system problems, and also proposes solutions to improve community health everywhere, but specifically in the rural counties of Georgia. The center is comprised of 15 personnel who offer diversity in academic, community, and professional expertise, and as mentioned, we are led by our Executive Director, Mrs. Glenda Grant. What we do, we develop relationships with the 120 rural Georgia counties. We research healthcare access, health disparities, and health outcomes, and we partner with rural Georgia for the benefit of rural Georgia. We are located on the Macon campus of Mercer University School of Medicine. Thank you. We're located on the Macon campus of Mercer University School of Medicine, across the hall from the CDAC and on the back side of the School of Medicine building. Our how and our why. So rural Georgia communities, as you know, face many challenges in achieving and maintaining health. And Mercer School of Medicine identified 10 grand challenges facing rural Georgia. You see that list there before you, but we want to make sure you notice that the number one top grand challenge of rural health is maternal and child health. So what are we doing about it? Well, we at the center take time to embrace evidence-based research. And just briefly, I want to highlight research done on maternity care deserts and access to obstetric care, as gathered from the Meredith et al. Study on the implications of using maternity care deserts to measure progress in access to obstetric care. It was a mixed integer optimization analysis done this year. The background indicated that lack of access to risk-appropriate maternity services, particularly for rural Georgia residents, is thought to be a leading contributor to disparities in maternal morbidity and mortality. Authors hypothesized that obstetric facility expansion policies focused on reducing maternity care deserts alone are impractical, and they could have negative consequences. Additionally, policies focusing on reducing distance to critical care obstetric services alone are not aligned with risk-appropriate care for the majority of pregnancies. And it reveals the need for new measures, new innovation to be done to address high-quality, risk-appropriate care, which can be used as targets for policy intervention. The results from this study indicated that out of the nearly 2 million reproductive aged women who live in Georgia, 5.5% live in maternity care deserts. Approximately 8% live further than 50 miles from critical care obstetric services, and 2% live in both maternity care desert and further than 50 miles from these services. Now, to many people, they may think these numbers are low, these percentages are low, but to all of us in this room, we know that anything greater than 0 is unacceptable. Where we are currently, you'll see on these maps as provided by these researchers, you'll see the maternity care deserts, B, individuals living greater distance than 50 miles from CCO care, and then the last map shows both. You may be wondering, well, how much of this is rural? I'm glad that you asked. As you see the orange overlay, and I'll go back and forth so you can see again, there and then rural. Everything that you see that's dark orange is rural counties. So all of these areas, these shaded regions that represent census block groups for A, B, and C all fall within rural Georgia. I'll break it down this way. What does that mean? We need to get to work. So how do we get to work? Where should we be going? Well, where we should be going is shown in this set of maps. On the far left, you'll see in A and in D where we currently are. To reduce these matters by 50%, meaning to give 50% of reproductively active women without access leads us to here in B. To completely eliminate this issue and allow 100% of reproductive actively women to have access gets us here. And what does that look like in numbers? Well, it shows that additional analysis suggests at least 56 new obstetric care facilities, which is an increase by 67%, would be required to completely eliminate maternity care deserts in Georgia. 56 new OBGYN care facilities. The expansion of 8 current facilities, meaning enhancing their healthcare services that they're providing, would ensure that all women in Georgia at least live within 50 miles of critical care obstetric services. So we have our suggested recommendations of what we need to do. Now is time to do it. Here at the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center, I shared earlier that we dive into research. We use the research to build our programs and projects to address the needs of rural Georgia citizens. I'll highlight 2 and then I'll take my seat. The first is the Maternal Health Improvement Pilot Study, which is a comparative study of clinical performance. With this particular study, we at Mercer University School of Medicine partner with one of our alums, Dr. Keisha Callens, who's an OBGYN that serves rural Georgia citizens in Jeffersonville and in Gray, Georgia. We also partner with Wellstar Medical Group Obstetrics and Gynecology, Dr. Joy Baker, Atrium Health Navicent Obstetrics and Gynecology, Dr. Raymond Betcher, there in Macon, and myself. And together we have built this project, this study, for the purpose of comparing the clinical performance of the handheld ultrasound device versus the traditional ultrasound device in a regular OBGYN office. And the main mission is to expand obstetrical ultrasound access to rural counties across Georgia. Again, going back and referencing those reproductive active women in rural Georgia that don't have access, that live outside of 50-mile radius of an OBGYN office or hospital for delivery. They need, they deserve, they earn the care that they should be getting. And so this, mobile ultrasound device has the capability to go where they are and meet the people where they are to provide the prenatal services that they stand in the need of. Secondly, the center is working on the physician workforce shortage in obstetric and gynecology by offering maternal health opportunities to rising second-year medical students across Georgia. We do that through our Maternal Health Observership residential summer program experience. And now I will pause from talking and allow you to witness a video that highlights our Maternal Health Observership summer program.
The Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center at Mercer University School of Medicine was established in 2018 by Georgia legislators to confront the complex healthcare challenges and wellness disparities facing rural communities. The work of the center focuses on partnering with the 120 rural counties of Georgia to improve healthcare through reliable research, creative strategies, and sustainable solutions. We even partner with rural healthcare providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, and beyond to expose students to real-life work experiences of their future careers and to offer desperately needed healthcare, clinical services, and educational resources to underserved and unserved rural communities across the state. One of our center programs that addresses the grand challenge of maternal and child health across rural Georgia is the Maternal Health Observership Summer Program. This 6-week program, which has been in existence since summer 2021, serves to expand the learning experience for rising second-year medical students of Georgia medical schools who are interested in obstetrics and gynecology and practicing in rural medically underserved communities. Objectives of this summer program include gaining clinical knowledge through direct observation of rural maternal health care providers and our maternal health symposium. Engaging in guided cutting-edge research, offering exposure to public health practitioners and online data and resources built to address maternal health disparities. Building connections with speakers and subject matter experts from the field of maternal health, and developing an understanding of the role that telemedicine serves in providing unique care options to underserved communities. Over the past 4 years, students have completed the program with a refined perspective of how they can help rural Georgia as future physicians, and more specifically, as rural OBGYNs. Our Maternal Health Symposium is an annual conference designed for healthcare professionals, both current and future, to deepen their understanding of rural maternal health and best care practices for addressing maternal health disparities. As the symposium educates students on the significant value of the maternal health care team, it is across the 6 weeks of the summer program that students get the opportunity to engage and learn from members of this team in rural Georgia, clinics, hospitals, and health department settings. And over the past 4 summers, students have observed preceptors across several counties of the state, including Spalding, Upson, Houston, Jones, Twiggs, Lawrence, and Coffee counties. The experiences that students have obtained and shared with us over the years truly displays the heart that goes into rural maternal health care. Students have highlighted the dire need of prenatal care and education that is present among expecting mothers and their supporting partners, as well as the lack of clinical resources which directs providers to use what they have and build connections with providers in surrounding counties to make ways out of no way for the health and well-being of their patients. Yet where is the hope, you ask? Mercer University School of Medicine student Alicia Williams, graduate of class of 2024, who inspired the idea for the observership program back in 2020, can share how following her graduation from medical school, she is now in Wellstar Kennestone Regional Medical Center's OB/GYN residency program in Marietta. Dr. Williams had this to say.
My favorite part about that summer, my favorite part absolutely is interacting with the patients and getting to know them and going back over time if I get extra time. Sometimes I would go back on my breaks as I got up to medical school just to continue my shadowing work and learn some more. But my second favorite thing was learning and getting hands-on experience in the field of OB/GYN that early in my medical education. And for me, it really kind of sealed the deal. Like, I think that I can really do this as a career.
As an additional 21 students have completed the summer program and continuing forward in their medical school careers, seeking to become OB/GYNs, a couple more alumni can share of their experiences in summer research projects with recommendations of where we go from here to address maternal health disparities of Georgia.
Hello, my name is Megan Kroll. I'm currently a third-year student here at Mercer University School of Medicine. During my time here in 2023, I got to be a part of the Maternal Health Observership Program. While being part of this program, I got to do research over how uninsured patients in rural Georgia lack access to OB/GYNs. And due to this, they had delayed care, increased hospitalization, and increased maternal mortality. My solutions to this analysis was to expand on Medicaid and to include more programs. These programs seek to enhance access to maternal and obstetric care in rural communities to improve maternal and neonatal outcomes. Thank you.
My name is Abby Ernest, and I'm a second-year medical student at Mercer University School of Medicine. This past summer, I was able to participate in the Maternal Health Observership at the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center. Through this program, I was able to conduct research, and my research was inspired by my hometown, Donaldsonville, Georgia's closure of its OB unit. So I really wanted to focus in on the closure of rural hospitals and obstetrical unit closures that serve minority populations.
So through my research, I realized that three main issues that led to the closures of these hospitals and units was the lack of proper insurance coverage, the poor retention rates of healthcare professionals, and lack of research specific to these minority populations that these hospitals and units
Yeah,
serve.
and I want you to
So
say
some of
something.
the
I want you to
solutions
say
that
something.
could be implemented to help, prevent further problems from occurring could be implementing proper research specific to these minority populations that could lead to the proper insurance coverages and also funds to help retain these healthcare professionals. Thank you.
We value your time in learning about the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center and our Maternal Health Conservatorship Summer Program. For more information on both, please visit our website at georgiaruralhealth.org. Thank you.
Got a few questions. Representative Al Williams, did you have a question?
Doctor, my question, I thought it was a great presentation and some very interesting facts. A couple of things. The minority doctors are about 5% of total doctors, as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a dire need, and you've spoken eloquently of the dire need in the rural. In your program, I didn't hear incentives to stay in the rural. See, Cobb County, that Dr. Williams I know is doing a great job, but that's Metro Atlanta. She zipped right down to the Fox. Help me with Deep South Georgia and Southwest Georgia, and what are you doing not only for minority doctors, but for doctors, period, OBGYN. I'm in Hinesville, and we're blessed to still have an active OBGYN unit at our hospital. But what's the incentive in this program?
Thank you, sir, for your feedback, and also excellent question. So there at Mercer University School of Medicine, we have rural scholarships for medical students in general. We also specialize in scholarships for students interested in becoming OBGYNs, and also scholarships specialized for students interested in becoming pediatricians. That's made possible by Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So that's an incentive while they're in school. And then beyond that, after they complete residency, they go into those rural areas to work. They also receive incentives from both School of Medicine and the state at that time as well.
Just to follow up, I know that we hate to talk about money, but that's what drives the ship. Now, incentives. Tell me about somebody's incentive who you want to get to Willacoochee, Georgia, and they've got a big medical bill from getting through medical school. Tell me about that.
So for that, again, if they're at Mercer School of Medicine and they're getting that scholarship covers their full 4 years of tuition while they're in medical school. And the only request, well, no, I won't say only request, but several of the requests after they complete medical school is to give that time back in rural Georgia for the scholarship that they receive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Kendricks, do you think or you feel that the cost of malpractice insurance prohibits or is a barrier to many OBGYN doctors wanting to practice in rural Georgia? I get hard to spit it out, but yeah.
Thank you for that question. Absolutely, it is. It is. But again, through those scholarships we offer, through the exposure to rural Georgia, while these individuals are still students, is important to us because we want them to see that the patients that are in rural Georgia are no different than the patients in urban Georgia. They have a need, they deserve quality care, and so we need you to go there to provide that quality care that you're being educated on.
But if they can't afford the insurance, they won't be able to stay there. I mean, we just don't have the volume to pay for it.
Right, right.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Any more questions? Thank you for being here, Clifton.
Let's see, there we go. Wow. I missed a good portion of your presentation. I came back for the last 10 minutes. And so you might have covered this, and I apologize if I miss it. Chairman Corbett, thank you so much for that question that you asked him about
The barriers to entry, particularly in OBGYNs, the malpractice insurance is just high as a cat's back. One of the questions that I have is, so we know we don't have enough docs in rural Georgia. That is a fact. Mercer has done an incredible job in providing rural docs in rural parts of the state. Incredible. One of the highlights of my year is to go to the Nathan Deal Scholars luncheon to see, I think there's over 100, maybe 110 docs in rural Georgia as a result of this program. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
We thank you.
Statewide, how do we compare docs per a resident in Georgia compared to other states? Is it we're feeling it more in rural Georgia because we don't have enough docs statewide, or do we have sufficient in the urban areas and we're just lacking in the rural areas because of economic opportunities? But as an economist, I know supply demand. If there is if we're not producing enough docs as it is, and you're going to receive perhaps more money in the urban areas, that's urban and even suburban areas, are we lacking overall in the state, and we're the byproduct in rural Georgia of not having enough docs?
Thank
that
you.
was a long way to get at a very simple question. I apologize.
But no, I'm appreciative for it all. Thank you for that feedback and question, because it drove home to the need of what you're asking for. Actually, your very next presentation that'll be given by our Dean Sumner will highlight what that looks like across the board for the state of Georgia, with the presence of medical doctors, the need for more medical doctors in rural areas. So I don't want to take her thunder. I'll allow her to present that to you all shortly.
Thunder. She's great. It's impossible.
She's absolutely wonderful.
Is that all? Any more questions for Dr. Williams? Thank you, Dr. Williams. Excellent presentation. And we thank you for coming and being with us.
Thank you all so very much.
Our next presenter needs no introduction, but let me tell you, she grew up in Washington County, Sandersville, Georgia. She's well known, she's well respected, and she's doing a wonderful job at Mercer School of Medicine. I present to you our own Dr. Jean Sumner.
Thank you for the invitation to be here today, and most important, thank you for the work you do for our state, because without you, we would be in trouble. You've done amazing work in terms of looking at healthcare, and everywhere I go, the legislature has always been a friend of rural Georgia, trying to help us get the services we need. But I'm honored to be here. I was asked to talk a little about retention with the Georgia physicians, and I don't need to review the data to you. You know we're in trouble. We don't have enough physicians in our state, and the projections are we will be in real problems in a few more years. We train a lot of physicians. In fact, and these are estimates, it's hard to find out exactly how many students you have in every class in the 4 medical schools we have here, or the 5 medical schools now, MD programs that we have here, but it's about 700 entering freshmen per year. So if you look at the projections, if we could even keep 50% of those guys in Georgia, it would really help. And then I don't know that it would help rural Georgia, because if you look at this year's data on the, I don't think you can see that very well, but around Atlanta is green and the rest of it is tan. There are very few healthy counties outside of metropolitan areas in the state. And when you have a county that's unhealthy, you don't have economic development, you have poor performance in schools. It's really important to address it for the sake of the people that live there. I believe in rural Georgia. I believe that the communities, though they may be poor and perhaps have a low educational level, have a lot of resilience, and they will help themselves if we give them that opportunity. So at the center and at Mercer, we really go out and, we travel all over the state and talking to communities, trying to give guidance on things that would be beneficial to them in terms of their health care. I think the most important thing we can do is recruit students from Georgia to stay in Georgia to go to medical school. And there's a large number of students who don't think they have a path to medical school, and those kids are usually in rural Georgia. Getting in medical school is very hard, and it's an arduous course. And in rural communities, there are not many mentors. A lot of these kids have never seen a doctor, or they see a doctor, but they don't know the doctor, or they go to the next county, so they don't have a mentor. And it's hard to be somebody, it's hard to go and think about a profession as possible if you don't know somebody who does that profession and has joy in it. And then recruit the students from our medical schools to stay in Georgia residencies. Everybody thinks grass is greener on the other side of the fence, but really most training programs are very similar. I have two brothers who are physicians, one trained at Mayo Clinic, one trained at Johns Hopkins. My brother at Mayo Clinic went to Harvard after that and did a fellowship. And I love to tell them they didn't get any more experience than I got at the Medical Center of Central Georgia. And that's true. I'm not being a little sister. It really is true. You go into those things and you don't get to do it because there's so many other people in line, so much subspecialization. They're great places. I trained at Oxford for a while when I was a resident in England. And Oxford was just like this amazing place. And you saw people that they named diseases after. But those house officers didn't get any more experience than I got in Macon. And that's not being an ego thing. It's just that we think they do. A lot of exposure. There are lots of great residencies in this state. And we need to try to get our students in medical school to realize that. And then I want to talk a little about retention. But when every MD program, I'm not sure about DO program, I'm sorry for being hoarse, every MD program in our state is required by our accreditors to have what they call pathway programs. It used to be called pipeline programs, but it's pathways now. And so we have to develop those pathways and focus on students who do not see that path forward, who don't have parents who went to graduate school or college, who live in rural Georgia, and who come out of schools that may not be the strongest in the state. And so I think a lot of students down in southwest Georgia and southeast Georgia don't think it's possible, but it is possible. But helping them believe that they can do it is one of our missions. I believe they can. I think they're some of the best doctors that we can produce. One thing that we've started doing we've done forever, but we've really expanded lately, is med camps. And we have an annual med camp in Randolph County, Cuthbert, Georgia. And we've done this for several years with the help of the school system there. And, I'm an optimist, but I got to Cuthbert one day, and I'm telling you, Mr. Williams, it's a difficult place. It's not a bad place, but we've had great support for our med camp. And we started it several years ago, and every year, the next crop, the ones that finished the year before, come back to be the leaders in the second camp. And so we've done this for several years. And we give these young people the skills they need to go home and take a blood pressure. We give them a good stethoscope, and when they leave that camp, they can take a blood pressure, and they can listen to lungs and hearts. I don't think they can interpret it, but they know what to do with their stethoscope. We give them a pulse oximeter, and they know what's normal and what's not normal. And we teach them how to do a glucometer. So if their grandmama's a diabetic, they can use their grandmama's glucometer and check her blood sugar for them. They leave there excited. We also give them scrubs with their name on it. Those things are hot. They love those scrubs. And we have a graduation for them. And it really has been an amazing process. And I think we're making a big difference down there with young people who begin to believe that there's a way forward. Our obligation in those camps is not to get them all into medical school. So we bring in pharmacy, nursing, respiratory therapy. We have every colleague we can get to Cuthbert to come down and do a hands-on experience. We also, I believe, were the first medical school in the country to partner with 4-H. I was a 4-H'er. When I entered the When our entering classes come in each year, I say, how many of you are in 4-H? And almost all the rural kids raise their hand. 4-H is a leadership organization. It's a great program, but I have a lot of interest in building that relationship. We do a program called Bear Essentials, where our underrepresented in medicine students have a conference every year with young people of African American or Hispanic descent who are interested in coming to medical school but don't have a help. And those kids sometimes will help those other young people find that path forward, connect them to the right resources, talk about how to get that done. That's been very successful. We have a Doctor for Day conference where we bring in young people from underserved populations, primarily rural, to the medical school. We give them a tour, take them through the anatomy lab, show them what classes are like, show them how to look up things in the library. And then we work with the AHEX, of course. We work with the weekend in the Classic City. We always presented that for 4-H. And we give tours to families. So if you're on vacation and you can't spend a lot of money, you can come to medical school and we'll give you a tour of the building and take you through the anatomy lab. And you'll be surprised how many people from rural Georgia make an appointment to tour our medical school. I don't know if you can see that, but these are some of the pictures from camp. The big picture at the top is our Doctor for a Day camp. The picture on the left over there is young people learning CPR. This is a young woman. We talk about maternal health and preparation for pregnancy. These are kids in Berrien County. We have 100 kids every year in our Berrien County camp. 100 kids from Berrien County. And it's a popular camp. And this year they learned to intubate and do basic life support. Now, they're not going to intubate anybody, but it helps to make them believe that they can do this. And we have great reviews. And over the course of the last 3 years, we've touched 1,549 participants, mostly from rural areas. So those things make a difference. In recruiting students, you have to look at, getting in medical school is hard, and you don't want to take anybody that's not qualified because it's really hard, and you want them to be successful. And if they really want to be a doctor, though, and they're willing to discipline themselves and study, we can help them get there. And so, you've heard me say this, we changed the way we admit. Medical school admission committees tend to focus primarily on a MedCat score, a medical college admission test, and a grade point average. We use about 40 points of data, and we will take the MedCat. I think you ought to use it as a point of data. We look at grade point, but we don't eliminate students entirely on that. We use 40 points. One of the points that matter, and we've shown it really correlates with success, is working your way through college. Because if you have the discipline to work through college and make good grades, you're going to do okay in medical school. Medical school is about a lot more than just being smart. You need to be very capable, but you need to be able to time management. You need to be able to handle stress. You need to be responsible. You need to be professional. So that's what's happened to our admissions. Now, Chairman Green, over there on the left, West Georgia needed some more students. Y'all had pretty bad health status. We went to Columbus, so we deliberately picked up some students from Columbus that didn't fall into our rural category. We're on the way back up. And that's what happened over the 4 or 5 years that we've done this. Those red dots are students that are entering classes. Over the course of 19 to 24, we have 405 rural medical students, truly counties of less than 500. Question a while ago of how many students will go back to these rural areas. The AAMC gives us data that 4.3% of MD students in this country were raised in a small town. I love rural Georgia. I grew up in a small town. I hadn't been to Thompson since they played basketball up here, and we never could beat Thompson. And those Knox girls back there, they whipped us on the tennis court because I hadn't seen them in a long time, but they were great. But, you know, when you come out of those small schools and you try to get in medical school, it's different. I came from a family of physicians. We had every opportunity that children could have in rural Georgia. We went into the Smithsonian. We'd had all the enhancement that my mother could figure out to give us to keep us out of trouble. I went to the Medical College of Georgia straight out of high school to nursing school. And in those days, you went to Augusta College in the morning, nursing school in the afternoon. You were a medical college student, but you went over to Augusta College. And I walked in my first chemistry class. And I was the only student in that class that had never done a college. I took chemistry in high school, but we never did any experiments. Yeah, Mac, I don't know if you remember Mr. Frazier. You remember Mr. Frazier? I think he did one, and he showed it to us. But so I made friends with the Atlanta students so I could pass chemistry. And if I had that experience, imagine a child whose parents didn't go to high school or didn't have an opportunity. And when you really come out of those schools and go to the University of Georgia, which is a great school, but you walk into a chemistry class of 400, and you came out of a high school of 50, and you're like me, you didn't do any experiments in high school, it's a challenge to get ready for med school. But these students do well. Rick McCann is our Dean of Admissions, and he's a biochemist. And I challenged him about 7 years ago to go back and to look at the data of our admissions. So we went back from the beginning of Mercy and looked at who could pass. Who do we take? Who did well? What were the characteristics? And that's where we got our formula. But if you look at the students who we consider really at risk, 496 is a low MedCat. Most people cannot get in medical school with a 496. We look at the MedCat, we look at the grade point average, we look at their life experience, we looked if they worked in college, we looked if their parents graduated from high school or college, we look if they have any of their parents were PhDs or MDs, and that's very rare in rural Georgia. But these students do very well. And it made our admissions committee a little nervous, so we track them. We know everything they do academically, we track them. And what happens is they do, this is a little more to it. I didn't know he had it where I borrowed the slide from my admissions thing. These kids out of rural Georgia, the state grades schools, and y'all know more about that than I do, but they often come from schools that are in the CD range as opposed to the AB range. But they do just as well at medical school as the kids that come out of the high-powered schools in metropolitan areas of our state. And this is the example of what happens. You can't read that, I'm sure, but these are the students that were considered at risk in the same class. These are the ones that were in the top of the class. They all matched at outstanding residencies. The orange is matched in primary care. About 88% of our students match in a primary care specialty. These matched at Vanderbilt, Oxnard, Wake Forest. Those matched at Chapel Hill, Birmingham. A lot of them are in Georgia. The young man who matched at Chapel Hill in Birmingham, at North Carolina, is one of our, a lot of those guys are our scholarship, but I always talk about this young man because he was so proud to be in medical school, and Tifton helped him. He went to ABAC, Dr. Bridge is sitting back there. They helped him get there. He had the lowest MedCat I think we've ever taken. He had the highest Step 1 score that had been made at that time. He matched in internal medicine, and the last thing he was a full scholarship. He's one of our Nathaniel scholars. He's going back to Tifton. And the last thing he said to me when I handed him his diploma was, "I'll be home soon." And he'll be home soon. So these kids do leave the state sometimes for residency, which I don't prefer. But we still read the state and the percentage of our graduates that stay in the state, because we really stress that. We think it's better. If a in-state student gets an in-state residency, it's about 90% chance they'll stay in the state. If they leave the state, there's only about a 50% chance they'll come back. The hospitals they train in have a lot of influence over them. They say, "Oh, you don't want to go home." They'll work you to death. They've done that since the beginning of time. I think they thought I'd lost my mind when I told them I was going home to Wrightsville and Sandersville. So, you pay for these residencies in Georgia. You pay a capitated rate for the residents, and I can't find out the exact number. I'm sure you probably know it. I tried. I couldn't find out the exact number. I do know it's between $14,000 per resident and $20,000 per resident. And so that's a lot of money when you think about the residency. It's graded based on the type of residency. I won't try to explain something I don't really have the information on. But my thought is that when you pay for that, then we should get something as a state back. And right now, residencies are held to a very low standard of 45% of the people of their residents stay in state with a 5-year rolling average. I voted against that because I'm on the ME Act. I just don't think that's enough. I think if you're going to pay for them, then you should have some commitment to stay, and the residencies see diversity in terms of school diversity coming from different schools is important. It is important, but there are a lot of good schools in this state, and if we could get more Georgia residents in Georgia residencies, we'd have more doctors in this state. And 48% of our students go out of state overall, all the schools. I think that one thing that the state needs is help from these rural hospitals and facilities and communities to recruit doctors home. We have a lot of young people who want to go home, but getting those communities to call them, to engage them, to have them down for a hamburger, to do something is very hard, and I ask them to all the time, and it does not happen. Particularly smaller hospitals. If you wait until a student is in residency to start recruiting him, you've probably lost him. Big hospitals are talking to our students at first. We don't give them names, but they know who they are, first and second years. And a lot of them are given a small stipend to sign a contract in their first or second year. So they're committed. And they have to go to that community. And the hospitals, the larger hospitals where they train, and one of the issues is that the young woman who's at Wellstar, Chairman Williams, she's a Wellstar for residency. She'll be back, I promise you. She's a great young woman, and she'll be a really good OB. So you got to remember that they go to urban areas and tertiary care hospitals to have a residency, and that hospital has a lot of influence on them. I love public health. I'm chairman of the Board of Health in Johnson County. I have been for 28 years. I think it's really vital. I think there's opportunity to help public health recruit good doctors into public health. We don't think about public health a lot sometimes till we have a crisis, but they're vital to rural communities. During COVID, people at Mercer, I hate to say this, were driving to Johnson County to get shots because they couldn't get on somebody's schedule in Macon, so I was sending them to Johnson County to get a COVID shot. I'm not sure that's legal, so maybe. And rural communities who don't have hospitals still need doctors. What the country needs more than anything else is community-based physicians. You go into the hospital, there's a hospital service, and you may not see the same doctor 2 days in a row, and you may not even see a doctor 2 days in a row. But if you talk to your patients when they come out, they don't even know who they saw. I mean, they don't know who the doctor was. And the hospital doesn't really know who they're sending them to. And so when patients are discharged earlier and earlier from hospitals, and that's appropriate because there's a lot of things that can be done in the community now that used to be done in hospitals. But there's nobody in many of these counties to see those patients when they come home. And when they leave that hospital, nobody answers the phone when they call back. I mean, they just don't even know who they saw, so they can't get to the right person. So we need to work on community-based care, and I believe that care should be physician-led. I went to nursing school. I love nurse practitioners, I love PAs. They are very vital to the healthcare system. But people are really sick in rural Georgia. Most of the chronic disease burden and the cost of care comes from untreated chronic disease. And almost everything you see in healthcare these days, with very few exceptions, trauma is one of them, but can be significantly moderated or prevented or cured if you found it early. But there's nobody out there to develop those relationships and to take care of those patients. And it's important to keep building those community-based programs. And make Georgia a doctor-friendly state. Credentialing is an issue. And y'all, I don't even want to, y'all have heard me talk on pharmacy benefit managers, and I called them the mafia of healthcare, and that has haunted me. I still feel the same way. But the credentialing is an issue. We just hired a physician. She's moving to work for us. 3 doors. They told us it'd be 90 to 100 days before we could credential her, 90 to 180 days before she could get credentialed with insurance companies. She's going to have the same insurance. She has perfect record. There's nothing that would prevent her. But you have to credential them through all these insurance companies again. And I think insurance companies need to really think about rural Georgia and the fact that when I left my practice, there was a young woman who came from Mercer, and she was boarded in family medicine, had added qualifications in OB and psychiatry. She was an outstanding physician. It took her 6 months to get in one insurance company credentialed. So I stayed there to help, because I was credentialed with that insurance company, and so I could sign off on her charts and she could get paid. Credentialing is an issue, and I know that doctors need to be credentialed, but it is a tremendous burden. So I think it needs some remedy. And Georgia's become known, true or untrue, as the state where you get sued as a physician. And that's an issue. You know, right now, most physicians now work for systems, and sometimes it's a system error. Sometimes there's not an error. But it scares the hound out of doctors. It is discouraging when one suit happens. You know the inside track on a suit, and you know maybe it was unfounded. Not being defensive. I mean, I believe that patients should be made whole. But I think the liability system we have in this country is a real detriment to care for people. So I hope we'll work on that. That's my presentation. I do want to address the salary, though. The true data, and I can send you the data if you want to see it, rural physicians can make more money than urban physicians. The payer mix is essentially the same everywhere. I had about 5 articles that I didn't put in this thing, but if you practice good medicine or are nice to people, the rural, you draw from a large area. And we have a series of 6 clinics. Our clinics are doing well. In Plains, we draw from about 20 zip codes. Now, it's sad that people have to drive that far to see us, but it's, you can do fine in a rural area, but you have to work. You have to be available. You have to be nice to people. You have to be a good doctor. If you're a bad doctor in a small town, you've had it, So I'm glad to answer any questions. We are very, very serious about what we do at Mercer for keeping doctors in our state and being true to our mission. But again, it would not be possible without the support we received from the legislature. So.
Thank you, Dr. Sumner. I think Representative Al Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Sumner, for your presentation. I said when I met you some years ago that if it were possible and we could clone you 25 times, we wouldn't have such a big problem in Georgia. And one of the disadvantages, I live in an undefined county. We are told we're rural, then we're told we're too big to be rural, and we live close enough to Savannah to be in their net and too far away to really benefit. So it's some position to be in. But your camps, I thought you made a great point in the beginning. The lack of interaction, particularly with minority students, having never known a doctor. Because I know this will be surprising to you, but some doctors take on a God mentality. I'm God, you can't look straight at me, and you certainly can't ask me a question because
if they're a Mercer grad, get their name and I'll call them up.
Good enough. So it's hard to get to know a doctor. In Liberty County, every first Saturday I have a town hall, and there's always a doctor there, and we don't talk about medicine. But your camps, where people are able to interact and do things, we're close to you. You have a campus in Savannah. But I could be wrong, but I've never met anybody from that campus, and I've never seen, I know we've got some people from Liberty County enjoying, but I've never seen what you're talking about done in Liberty County, where we have students from all over the world because of the military there. And I think the camp would be an outstanding hit, particularly with minority students.
I think, and I'll go back and check, we do a virtual camp I didn't really mention every summer as well. We started it during COVID, the virtual camp, and we thought, well, we'll cancel this after COVID. But it was so popular that we had students from almost every county outside of metropolitan Atlanta. So I suspect we've had some, and what we do is we mail them a kit. And in that kit is all the supplies for their camp. They learned to sew, stitch, there's just amazing array of things. We do a mental health day where we do some resilience training for them. It's every morning. Well, this year we mailed all those boxes, and Dr. Williams can probably tell, was it 100 or so boxes? We mailed them weeks in advance. We still are missing 80, and we insured them and sent them priority mail.
Well, that's the post office.
But it is the post office. But we're tracking them down because we paid good money to get them, but it's a little late for that camp. But that camp is incredibly popular. And we do a lot of things in that camp, but we expose them to a variety of occupations, and our medical students get involved, and they teach different things to these young people. When we were in COVID, we taught them about what the COVID vaccine did, how it worked, what COVID looked like, and they were supposed to educate their families on it. We do a lot of things that, but we send them things to work on. So every day they have an experiment in that camp. And so we didn't stop it, and it's really popular, and we're going to continue it. We have an opportunity to do a camp in the coming year that I just was talking about yesterday, to have a camp for families with children who have cerebral palsy in rural areas, and bring the whole family into that camp so that the parents get education, or the caretakers get education, and the children get to have fun with others. And so we're going to probably do that next year. But we'll continue. I have an amazing woman who is named Beatrice Cunningham, who is a Georgia Tech grad. She majored in chemical engineering. She threw the shot put for Georgia Tech. She was an honor grad, and she runs those systems, and it's amazing to see what she's been able to do. And she's such a great leader that we engage a lot of other groups that want to help, and so we're open to that. And we do some work out there. We tried to work with the military, but we couldn't get too far with them.
Quick follow-up, if I could. Liberty County is kind of divided. The western side of Liberty County is a socioeconomically more progressive area. The eastern side is where a great deal of minority students live, and up until recently it is improving. It was a broadband desert, so a lot of them probably didn't get in on the virtual end, and that's the eastern side of the county. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to touch bases with the Savannah group because I have no knowledge whatsoever of that, but I'd like to know.
Well, Dr. Williams, let me touch base with them first.
Good, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure they'll take your call.
The students are always wanting to do that, and we need to engage the Savannah students with the center too. But and we can get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Yarder.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. We appreciate that so much in Georgia. Love the camps. Boy, what a great concept. I'd love to have one in District 152.
We can make that happen.
Well, come on. But you mentioned pathways, and you know, a lot of students don't have a pathway to even consider medical school. Are they aware of some of the scholarships and things that might be available to help them get to that level?
Every dime that Mercer raises for the medical school goes to student benefit. And so the Nathan Dill Scholars has really grown. I think we have 10 more. We'll get up to 119 this year, Nathan Dill Scholars. I don't hold me to that number. It's close. We have the accelerated track that is funded by the legislature. We started the first accelerated track in the country with your help. And it's you go 1 year and pay tuition. The next 2 years are free, and we give up the 4th year as tuition. And they get the same curriculum. And we have a match waiver. And that match waiver, even though they're registered for the match, they go straight into the residency in Savannah, Macon, or Columbus. And that's a great program. They come out in 3 years. All our scholarship contracts say that you will live and work in a rural area, because we don't think commuting is a good thing. And you need to know your patients. And I live across the county line from Washington County. I got my husband to the county line, but I couldn't get him back to Washington County. But if you live in that region and you need to participate in that county. You need to be the football doctor on Friday night. You need to know what that county offers. So I'll be glad to talk to you about that area. We may have some work going on there. Through the center, we're in 120 of 120 rural counties doing something.
Okay.
So
Very good. Thank you.
Chairman Green.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sumner. You know what you have meant to Southwest Georgia. This lady started the Clay County clinic. She broke that little desert down there, and we pull from every area of Alabama and Southwest Georgia. The camp at Randolph was a great thing, and let me tell you what it's done at Andrew College. It has made their nursing program grow because of those individuals that are now interested in that particular field. And you are, that was an incredible thing to come up with and work with. What still worries me is, how do we keep these doctors in rural Georgia? How do we, they don't want to come to stay in rural Georgia.
They don't want to stay in rural Georgia if they're not from rural Georgia. And so if they grew up in a rural community and have an opportunity, they're very bright, but they don't have a lot of business sense, and the cost of practice scares the hound out of them.
Yeah.
So if there's an organization that can help them get started, they'll do fine. Overcome some of these insurance barriers, because they don't have money to wait 8 months to be paid. And that's a huge area. I mean, unless they work for somebody, they can't go into private practice. And so who are they going to work for in Randolph County? You want them to be part of that community. So all of our scholarship students take part in a business of medicine course. They have lectures on contracts. We want them, but they also have to negotiate through that residency in a tertiary care hospital that recruits them every day.
And that's where we need the help, is to help them navigate. We've got to set up some mechanism to help them navigate and understand what is available to them, what they can do.
I think they need to have a place to go and look for opportunities, and then somebody that can help them negotiate that. And we try to do that, but we need partners in that. By regulation, you can't just say we have all these students, call them up. But their names get out there somehow. And so we started having a health fair. We had a health fair in Valdosta a week or two ago. We're going to have one in Macon. We're going to have one in Savannah. And all our students will be there. We'll invite all the rural hospitals to come and meet the students and start talking to them about going home. But over time, I believe, right now we're about to celebrate our 20th pediatric scholar for the Children's Scholarship. That's a full ride. And we'll have 100 over 10 years. And those students are required to live and work in a rural community. Pediatrics is the most underserved specialty in Georgia. And it's pitiful. And family medicine docs are involved in all of our continuing education if they see children for pediatrics. We're going to have the accelerated track, which is well over 100 now, that are committed to rural Georgia. We have the Nathan Dill Scholars. So we really try to accept mission compliant students. So we're 70% outside of metropolitan Atlanta and right at 50% rural. And compared to 4.3% for the nation, we're doing pretty good there. But we're not perfect. And 80% of Georgia lives in the 11 counties around Atlanta. But right. We need that infrastructure and that help getting them home. Honest to gosh, these kids want to go home. Yeah. And in terms of, I appreciate Chairman Williams' compliment, but what makes me excited about now, I don't drive that mission. The Dr. Williams, the faculty, they think they're making a difference in the world, and that's what people go to work for. They're proud of of our changes and the things we've been able to do. So I think we've developed sustainability, we like to talk about at Mercer. This is sustainable. We have lots of calls from around the country to show us how we're working in rural areas. Our rural clinic model is very unique. So people want to know how we're doing that. We share everything we've got. Wake Forest came down to find out how we were doing rural. We're trying to help them do rural in North Carolina. I've offered to go to the mountains, whatever they want me to do. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Sumner, thank you for your presentation this morning. And if we talked about all the good things going on at Mercer Medical School and things y'all are doing, we'd be here all day. But you gave us some numbers that I'm really interested in trying to get a better handle on. We hear from a lot of people about a lot of things. And the thing that concerns me, this house has been a leader over the years in establishing more residency programs around this state. We've increased the number of residency slots significantly. But the problem that I have is what you alluded to, and I wish you'd talk a little bit more about it. The fact that we're graduating a good number of doctors from the medical school. Now we've got a new medical school that's going to be opening in Savannah and a new dental school, and Athens is going to be their own medical school, so we're going to even graduate more doctors. My question is, how are we going to keep them here? And you hit on it, and what I hear, and correct me if I misunderstand this, that we're only keeping somewhere between 25 and 30% of our Georgia medical school graduates in Georgia doing a residency program. And as you pointed out so rightly, if you take a Georgia student who graduates from a Georgia high school, goes to a Georgia medical school and does a residency program in Georgia, the chances of them staying in Georgia are very high. But if you send 75% of our graduates out of state to do their residency training, we're not going to get them all back. So can you help us, tell us what you think we can do to help increase that number? I know we're never going to be 100%, and we probably don't need to be at 100%, but we need to be better than where we are. And I know that it's a complicated issue. If it was simple, we've already had it solved. But from your perspective, what can we do that would be the most helpful in your eyes to make this happen?
I think, first and foremost, look at these students that are not being recruited to med school, these students that don't see a pathway, the underserved populations. And some of them's parents are farmers and they're successful, but they don't know a path to med school. They can't see it. Undergraduate, high school, they work on all these CVs that don't really matter. They need to have some shadowing experience in real healthcare. When they get to the University of Georgia or wherever they go to college, the undergraduate pre-med advisor needs to understand they don't have to have 12 organic chemistries. They need to have the minimum. Because some kids aren't great in organic chemistry, and that kills them, and they won't go to med school because they think, well, if I can't do this, I can't go to med school. We teach you what you need to know. Music majors do as well as a biochemistry major, as long as they have the prerequisites. So we bring in the pre-med advisors to these schools and try to say, if a student loves 12 chemistry courses, that's what he should take. But if they have to work really hard to do it, if they can do well in it, whatever the minimum requirements is, they'll do well in medical school. I think that being able to take a kid who really grew up in Georgia, who went to high school here, and we use high school as our metric. Some schools they came to university for a year here, and then they're Georgians because after a year, that's residency. And those kids may be from California, come here to establish residency, go to school here, and then go back to California. I think looking at that is important. We look at that. I think showing a path forward we try to keep our tuition as low as we can. Last year we had the lowest student tuition in the state, and we're proud of that. But med school is expensive, and helping these young people have fiscal responsibility and not rent an apartment for $2,000 a month and, just like we used to do in school, live as cheaply as you could. We do that. Working with the residencies to encourage them to take Georgia students. The new residencies, I am 100% supportive, and we've helped Valdosta, we're helping Coffee County, and we're helping with others, but they get in a hurry and they want to fill that residency. And it started up and they have 10 slots and they want to fill all 10 slots. And we try to say, just slow down. If you get 3 this year and they're all from Georgia, you'll get 5 next year and then you'll get 10. And I know it decreases what they get from the federal government, but I think it's very important to not just fill your residency up because you can. Because a lot of the people they fill them up with are from far off. and they're not going to stay in Georgia. It's a stepping stone to get here and to go elsewhere. So really working with the residencies, help the residencies understand that accepting a Georgia student is helpful to them and it's helpful to the state. But you pay the same for all the residents. So I'm not trying to undercut what they get. I just think that there ought to be an emphasis by those residencies in taking Georgia med school graduates. In my mind, I think that's important. Then get the small hospitals and the hospitals that need them, the communities that need them, to understand they need to start recruiting sooner. Sometimes it's just subscribing to the local paper and sending it to them. Sometimes it's just sending them a birthday card or pick up the phone and say, we're counting on you. It's not giving them gifts or anything. It's just staying in touch with them. Because once they hit med school and residency, they're in a different universe. They're busy. They don't have a whole lot of free time. They probably don't come home as much as they did in college, and you lose them to the excitement of a tertiary care hospital. I don't know if I could go on, Chairman Parrish, but it really is important to help those residencies understand the importance of taking Georgia students. Now, we had 100% match day one. Our students match. And I'm not saying that on Mercer's behalf, but I'm saying it on rural Georgia's behalf. Because I'm glad when our students match at Harvard and Vanderbilt, that's great. But I don't want to tell the student I'm not happy. I'd rather they match in Macon or Savannah or somewhere else. But our students do very well in the match, and most of them come home. And most of the ones that match have a scholarship that requires them to come home. But I want them to come home because they love rural Georgia and they think it's their calling too. Thank you very much for letting me be here.
We got a few more questions
I'm
if
sorry.
you have time.
Sure.
Chairman Perkle.
Sumner, I love you to death. And for Dr. Williams, not only they think that they're changing the world, they actually are making an impact. And I want to give you kudos for that. Your presentation, as I broke it down, focused on two parts. One is the supply of docs, and the second is on health outcomes. And I want, if the chairman will indulge me, a question on each one of those. Would that be okay? As long as you do it short. Because I kind of want to know what we can do. We all know the problem. We all recognize the problem. You lay that out. But the things that we could do around this table is kind of what I would love for us to focus on. I mean, one thing is the tort environment, as you mentioned, and liability. I have been informed by pretty strong sources that is something that's going to be addressed. So we're going to look at that because that really is siphoning off some of our docs. I've got an OB that I know delivered my kids, and he's going to quit OB because of torts. But in terms of the supply of docs, credentialing, what can we do? Is there something that we can do around these tables that we can do to help that problem? And secondly, the chart that you gave that caused me most concern is the very first one you put up there that dealt with healthy versus unhealthy, and most of us live in an unhealthy area. And you mentioned that untreated chronic disease is what is just blowing us up. The things that we can do, so I have access to physicians, and I live in one of these unhealthy areas. But I recently found out that after years of neglect, even though I know docs and have access to them, that I have not availed myself of them. And is there things that we can do with public health, with our rural centers that would be a marketing, so get some blood work, see what your cholesterol is, and the sugar, and the things that keeps you out of a poor health outcome. Is there something that we can institute or put forward from our positions that, while we can't treat, I don't know of anybody here that can treat the chronic disease, that we can push for a more emphasis for our constituents to get the chronic problem started early?
I really do think that establishing local care with good doctors and good teams, good nurse practitioners, but the idea that it is harder to be a good doctor in a small town than it is in a city because you're by yourself. And you need to be able to have broad training. So generalists matter. One reason Europe has better numbers sometimes than we do is they honor their generalist. But I think the secret to changing health may be a little late for me and not you, but starting in the schools. You know, I've come from a family that's, as far as I know, we never smoked a cigarette. Probably my siblings did in college, but I don't know. But my children went through school when they heard, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. Don't wear your seatbelt. And when they were little, if you didn't grab them, they'd go walk up to somebody in a restaurant that was smoking and say, don't you know that'll kill you? You know, and so I believe with our children's initiative that we're working in these schools, we're working in these ERs and rural hospitals, we're working with pediatricians to give them support. When you have a child with a health problem that comes in to see the pediatrician or the family medicine doc, they have so much opportunity to teach, and you got a motivated parent, generally speaking. Bringing health literacy into churches, we have a pastor-physician alliance, and I'd love to see some of you come if you'd like. It's coming up in October. We've been working for 2 years in Berrien County and other counties. I think we have about 5 or 6 counties now. Together, the doctors and the health professionals and the pastors. Because what we found with vaccine hesitancy in Hancock County was they had like the worst vaccine hesitancy in the country during COVID. But they had nobody to tell them this vaccine's safe. So we went to the ministers. They carried tremendous authority. So health literacy is a huge area, and it's not a billboard. It's relationships. It's not TV. I mean, they had all the rappers and singers and everything on TV saying, take your vaccine. Didn't work. They wanted somebody they knew and trusted to say, I took it, you'll be okay. So work with the children, work with health literacy, and really, in Clay County, and honestly, I always think we can do something, but I went to Clay County and I thought, I don't know if we can do this. That was my first thought. I mean, there was no place to eat. They didn't have a pharmacy. You saw these young men hanging out downtown because there were no jobs. They didn't have share a school system with Randolph County. It was beautiful, though. But we ran into some people who had retired there because they have beautiful state parks and quite a history there. And together with those guys, we were able to refurbish that hospital, get a One Georgia grant, brought in a good doctor. We just hired our second doctor over there. Good PA, full x-ray and lab. And the health status in Clay County went from 159 out of 159 in a year, a little over a year, to 112. So I'm hoping for 90. That's a long way from 159. And so having good care on the ground that sees everybody and that you can walk in and see if you need to, and you don't have to go through a phone tree. And we decided not to go the route of, rural health clinics are great, FQHCs are wonderful. We just don't want that bureaucracy in these counties, so we make house calls. We do whatever we need to do to help. We just hired 2 natives of Taylor County in Reynolds, Georgia. 2 young men, one's a physician, one's a nurse practitioner. And I can't wait to see what happens in that county. It's going to be amazing because those 2 young men are so enthusiastic about being home. And then we have another student on the Savannah campus who's their first cousin who wants to come home. You know, Bainbridge, in that area where that young woman was from Donaldsonville, we have about 18 or 19 students from that area because once they came, they recruited their colleagues. And so getting physician care back into these counties and disputing, I know that's what you hear about income, but solid data says you'll do just as well in a rural area, you know. So I don't know if that helps, but I can talk about rural health all day. I mean, I think though I'm encouraged that if you go into smaller hospitals, they're coming back a little bit. And doctors are coming out of cities because in Sandusville, they can't get OR time in Augusta and Macon, so they start coming doing outpatient surgery in Sandusville.
Can we help you with credentialing?
I'm not an expert on insurance, though I stay mad at credentialing all the time. There should be some way when your doctor has a perfect record, has no flaws, that if they're credentialed on Blue Cross Blue Shield or United or whatever, Medicare Advantage, it should be seamless. What Medicaid has gotten better, but there still should be fast. It should not be 3 months. It's one button. You got all the data. The Board of Medicine does all that due diligence. They have the background checks. They have the primary source verification. But we've created an industry of credentialing.
I have a chairman has told me that they're working right now on credentialing, so.
Thank you. I appreciate that because it is such a need. Such a need.
We got 2 more questions. Chairman Hawkins, then Chairman Tarver.
I'll make this clear. Glad to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah. That credentialing is something I was going to talk about. I'm glad to hear someone's working on that, and I'd like to talk to you later, maybe in Atlanta, about that. I've got some ideas because I've had physicians and dentists tell me they've gone back to their parents' practice, and they're waiting 3 to 6 months to get an okay to see Medicaid patients, and that's really ridiculous. I mean, you know, but also with the insurance companies, you know, the PPOs and those type of things, HMOs particularly, the capitated plans, they're taking a long time to take someone and say, yeah, we will pay you. I mean, you can see the patient, but you're going to have to wait till we okay you to pay you, which leads me into this other situation. I'd like to later follow up with you on the delays in being paid and maybe get some more specifics, because in the state we do have a prompt pay law of 14 days, you know, on electronic and in whatever it is now, 19, 20 days on a written. But it's based on a clean claim. And it's amazing when I listen to my colleagues about, well, they said it wasn't a clean claim. It was just a checkup. How's that not a clean claim? I don't know. It's going to take 2 or 3 months to get paid.
It's a game, and
Yeah.
I mean, I had a patient that I'd seen for 20 years that had a problem list, and for some reason, we were dictating notes. I left off his 6th problem, which was well-controlled hypertension. I just didn't put it on the list, and they wouldn't pay. And so it took us about 8 months to get them to say it's in the notes. Just read the notes. And so you get really, as a physician, you get really frustrated, which I don't know is helpful. But you're trying to take care of people, and they won't pay you, and they delay payments, and they hope you'll give up. But you always win if you stick with them, because you're usually in the right. I mean, you're not perfect, but you're usually in the right.
Right.
But insurance controls so many things. And we have a colleague that just got diagnosed with a breast cancer. And just watching what she's having to go through to jump all these hurdles to get ready for her surgery. And it's just, it shouldn't be that way. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert on insurance, but I do think credentialing is a game, and I think narrow networks hurt Georgia terribly, particularly rural areas.
I would like to invite you to come to Atlanta. We'll talk later, maybe speak in committee about this, because we cannot get young folks, young medical professionals or dental professionals to small towns when they can't get paid and they owe all this money. And I got out when I was 28, and my wife said, we're having babies. We started having babies. I mean, that's a lot, and not get paid for what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll get together with you.
Thank you.
Sit here long enough and let Purple talk long enough, he'll ask you a question. Already had plenty.
It's good to have him back.
Well, we are, right now, it's just time for you to start speaking, so we've got plenty of time. You were scheduled for 10:30. We appreciate you very much, and the thing that stuck out in my mind listening to these professionals was the credential part that everybody's brought up here. When I was in business, we were partially self-insured for medical, and insurance companies can pretty much tell you what their costs are going to be, but average age of insured, your geographical area, they're pretty sharp. But looks like they would see that the failure to treat the chronic diseases you talked about, what ends up costing them more. If we could keep these doctors in these rural areas, we would in fact eventually, well, pretty quickly start lowering our medical costs.
Right.
If a person serves a residency in Georgia, they're with another doctor, correct?
They're with a whole team of doctors, yes, sir.
So why can't they get certified or in the network or whatever during that period of time? They've got a track record of what they've done. And I mean, this is a free enterprise system, but there might be some pressure to with all your statistics to show what the end cost would be in lowering medical costs in the state of Georgia overall, keeping our doctors in rural areas by letting them get paid more quickly through their track record as a resident. Why, I don't understand why it takes so long.
You know, I don't either. I think as a resident, you know, they should be able to get credentials, but they aren't fully, they get their final certification after residency. They get to pass their boards. I don't know what the insurance companies think. I do know it's a system that fewer access, a little less access in some ways makes more profit. I may be wrong on that, but it does, if you have better health, it costs less money, and it leads to economic development, a lot of things in these rural communities, so they'd have more clients, but I'm not the expert on insurance for sure.
I will say that I think that's the number one thing I heard today.
Thanks, sir.
This credential, so all you experts in the medical field, that's something that get done. To me, that's the most key we heard from you today.
Thanks,
All
sir.
very good, but that's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sumner.
Thank you.
We always appreciate you being here.
Glad
Thank
to be
you.
here. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Chairman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, this committee would not exist without the help of and the backing of our speaker, John Burns. He just sent me a thing. He's down in Savannah, and he wishes us well. He wishes he could be here today. But he did send two individuals from his office. We have Keith that is here with us, and Haley. And today's a very special day for Haley. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Haley.
He is here. Take the break. Okay. Take a break. We're going to take a short break until our next presenter gets ready.
You can. You know it. If y'all will take your seats again, we'll get started. We're trying to stay on schedule today. Thank y'all so much for the great presentation so far, and we look forward to our next ones.
Leo, come here for a minute.
Okay, I can do. Yeah.
All right, we're ready to get started again from our break. But before we get started, I want to thank Chairman of the County Commissioners, Charlie Newton. He stopped by here. He's probably not here now, but he did stop by, and I want to thank him for coming by. Also want to thank Becky Riles for the snacks. We had a chance to take a break, and the snacks are delicious back there. Thank you, Becky, for the snacks. Mr. Chairman.
All right, we're ready for our next presentation. This will be given by the Georgia Board of Health Care Workforce and Chet Bastine, okay, as the Executive Director, and we're delighted to have you today. Thank you so much for coming.
So thank you, and I'm glad to be here. Chet Bastine, Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce. I'm the Executive Director for the agency. We are administratively attached to DCH. And again, thank you for giving me some time and inviting me to come on down here and speak to y'all. What I've got in front of y'all is an agenda. And really the first several bullets we'll go through fairly quickly. I just want to make sure everyone understands who we are, what we do. And really what I'll do is get into the physician workforce component, the graduate medical education, and I'm actually going to talk about medical school for a second as well. So that's kind of the course for today. And then I am not intending to take up the full time because I know there's a lot of folks here and they want to ask some questions. So I'm hoping to wrap up my component within 15 or maybe 20 minutes at most. So hopefully that's a good plan. And if there's questions, just definitely want to answer any and all of them for y'all. So just brief history on the Workforce Board. Just go from the beginning. We started in 1976. Actually hard to believe that this agency has been around. It has evolved and grown over the years, but since 1976, when it started to fund family practice or family medicine residencies, there were only 4 programs back then. And in current day, we actually fund 16 programs now. So it's quadrupled in size with over 300 GME or graduate medical education slots being funded throughout this great state. So that's from the humble beginnings till today. And then in the middle, you'll see some what I like to call growth spurts. So in 1983, we added additional specialties. In 1999, there was a GME commission that was done. And then I believe then Senator Perdue carried the bill that changed our name to the Georgia Board of Physician Workforce. And then as you progress on to 2016 and 2017, dentists, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants were added into our purview from a loan repayment perspective. And then in 2019, the naming convention changed to the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce, which then reflects more of the work that we do. While physician workforce and GME has been at our forefront in our DNA from day one, we do also do work within the lanes of nursing, dentists. Actually, I was just talking to Representative Hawkins on that just moments ago. He was helpful with us doing a lot of good work. So we really view ourselves as a healthcare workforce arm here in Georgia. With that being said, this is our mission and vision. We really, what we do is we, as the mission, the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce identifies and addresses healthcare workforce needs with an emphasis on underserved community. So we view is there are different types of healthcare for different communities in the sense that one community might be well staffed with this type of healthcare licensure or care, but maybe another lane they might not be well staffed. A lot of times it's geographic, sometimes it's not. We do have many programs that operate off of a geographic requirement, such as our loan repayment programs. Most of them, which I'll touch upon, operate within a population threshold, but not all of them actually operate that way, especially the newer programs that we've bought online. So that's our mission, and then our vision is the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce works to see Georgia communities, especially in medically underserved areas, have improved access to needed physicians and other healthcare practitioners, thereby enhancing the health and well-being of Georgia's citizens. So that's kind of who we are, what we do. What I'll do is I'm not going to read every bullet here. I know everybody probably knows who we are and what we do. I will just focus on data. That's a big component. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to have a sample slide for y'all. That is one thing that we are known for. We actually have 3 data analysts, a manager, and 2 analysts that do all sorts of slicing and dicing. We're led by someone who has a PhD, and then 2 data analysts support that individual, where we're able to ingest the data from the respective licensing board, clean it, process it, and then present it in a very, what I believe, easy to understand and visually appealing format, all available online to anybody, anytime. And then we do provide that to the governor, various members of the General Assembly, and then also we like to work collaboratively with industry groups. We're all in this together is our view at the board. The board is made up of actually 15 individuals that have been appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So to the left of my picture, you'll see 3 individuals. That is our chair, Dr. Jim Barber, who's an orthopedic surgeon in Coffee County. You've got then Mr. Will Kemp. He is our non-medical, non-healthcare individual. He's a commercial banker. And then you have Dr. Lily Henson, who is actually the Piedmont Augusta Hospital CEO and a neurologist by training. The board also has additional physicians, nurse practitioner, dentist, physician assistant, and a couple hospital administrators on as well. So we view ourselves as pretty broad and diverse. And then brief background on me before the board. I spent a number of years running hospitals, so I have a non-clinical healthcare administrative background, and so I believe I fully understand how the healthcare ecosystem works out there. Just briefly, again, we focus on GME, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, data, loan repayment, and undergraduate medical education, which is also known as medical school. UME is the acronym used for undergraduate undergraduate medical education, but also known as medical school. And then I would not, this is my last slide before I get into the GME and physician workforce components. I would not be doing my job if I didn't talk about the good work I believe we did in FY24. What we were able to accomplish was administer $3 million in competitive grants to nursing schools with additional capacity and wait lists. That went to 8 schools around this great state. It was actually our second year administering that grant program. We're about to turn on the applications for this fiscal year as we're just making a couple changes in the questions. Every year we learn and we grow from it, so that'll all be available online. Additionally, we awarded competitive grants for graduate medical education for exploration to Children's Hospital of Atlanta, South Georgia Medical Center, Southeast Georgia Health System, and Wellstar's Paulding location. So that again is another grant program that is live today. That program, just so you all know, what it is, it's really just there for institutions that want, whether they have existing GME or they want to grow their GME, they are encouraged to apply. We run it on a rolling basis now. We changed that for this fiscal year in order to have the flow and the rate and the responses actually go quicker. And really all it requires is you submit the application. We do ask that the hospital, and we are changing it to be more, I want to say we were friendly before, but we're going to be even more friendly. We do ask the hospital that whatever the funds they get, that the first $10,000 of expense that they incur, just to show a small commitment to this cause, and then the state, through the funds that we are managing, is good for the next $75,000, and that was brought down from $20,000 last year. Going on our accomplishments, we actually just were recently named a finalist from the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. We do have a lot of data on our website. I'm going to show that in a moment. We do a lot of workforce dashboards that are interactive. You can slice and dice the data however you'd like, or even download it and do it, manipulate it locally on your own computer. but we have published a lot online over the last 12 months, which kind of goes along with the last couple bullets over there. And then last but not least, what I'll talk about is the loan repayment programs. I wouldn't be doing my job. I'm in a community that has benefited from it, and there's many communities in Georgia. We do operate a lot of loan repayment programs. Most of them work off of a population of 50,000 or less in the county of the most recent census, and that is for dentists, physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. We do also operate another program that is just for nurse faculty. There is no geographic threshold on that one. They just have to be at certain institutions as defined by the code. And then this year, we actually just opened up the application, I want to say earlier this week, the behavioral health loan repayment. There is no geographic restriction on that. We do use some metrics to assess where folks are at in terms of ranking and scoring and all that, but there is no 50,000 population, and that is a program that is for psychiatrists, psychologists, nurse practitioners, nurses, social workers, marriage and family counselors, and more. You should just go to the website if you're interested at our website, and it'll have all the licensures there. But it is behavioral health is a team sport, so the loan repayment is eligible for the entire team. With that background, I am now going to dive more into the physician lanes, the GME, a little bit of UME, what I was asked to come here and present to y'all. What I am going to put up is just a couple stats. I think everyone knows it, but I was actually just having this conversation with Chair Parrish during the brief break. The second phrase you see on this slide, Georgia is graying at a rate much faster than it is growing. And what you see there is the population. I'm going to read it out loud just so everyone in the room, especially in the back, can hear it. Population of residents 65 years and older is expected to grow at a rate almost 6 times faster than Georgia overall over the next 5 years. And what happens with a population of 65 plus, there's a different set of perhaps medical specialties that population needs. It might be neurologists, endocrinologists, rheumatologists. I think we were having a conversation on urologists. But there is a lot of physician specialties outside of the primary care lane. So this is really, it's great. Georgia's a great place to live. It's a great place to stay. It's a great place to come and retire. But there's a lot of growth. So I just wanted to provide that statistic as I dive into the next several slides. So first one is UME. Again, UME is undergraduate medical education, also known as medical school. And what I've done here is I've presented on the left-hand side is the last few years of medical school graduates. So in 2022, there were 694 graduates from Georgia medical schools, and that would be Mercer, Emory, Morehouse, PCOM, and MCG. Now, 12 of them did not enter the match. That's the cycle, the program where they go and obtain a residency. And every year there's always a handful, a very small handful, that do not go into match for personal reasons. Everyone has their own reason, but there's always a handful, or I should say very much usually is a handful. But of the 694 in 2022, 194 remained in Georgia for residency of all specialties. And that was a 28% yield is what that was. And then if you move up to 2023, we now had 734 graduates, which is great. And we retained 225 for all specialties. So it was a yield of 30.5%. And then finally, in the most recent group, which was just earlier this year, 735 graduates, 10 did not go into match, a 31% yield at 230 staying in Georgia. These are numbers that are getting better. Of course, I think everybody would want more, but I wanted to kind of paint a picture of where we're at. These are individuals who are, all three of these medical school classes are currently in residency. Some will finish in 3 years, some will finish in 4, some will finish in 5. It just depends on what specialty they go into. And then at the bottom, I did put for some context, in 2016, we had 626 graduates, which 142 stayed in Georgia for residency of all specialties, so a 23% yield. So if you think about it, the numerator has increased, the yield has increased, so it is it's a good thing. We're trending in the right direction is what I'm trying to illustrate here. So now I'm going to move on to GME. And there's been some chatter on, are there GME openings? Are there, what can we do to fill them? So here are the numbers. Now, what I will tell you is that picture there you see of the dart with the moving target. I did that on purpose because this is a moving target. This is a fluid figure. Everyone you talk to in this world will tell you that, because in high level in Georgia, we have about 3,000 residents at any given time. There are about 500 fellows. They are lumped in under GME, but they are a fellow, which means they finished their residency. With that many people going through training, things can change. People need to take time off. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. They might have a change of heart. I mean, again, it's an individual decision. So it's a moving target is what I'm really trying to illustrate here. But currently in Georgia, we believe through our data, there's about 230 slots just in primary care. And what we define as primary care is internal medicine, family medicine, emergency medicine, psychiatry, pediatrics, general surgery, and OB. What that 230 does is it excludes any military GME. There are some military, it's not available to civilians, so we excluded that. But the 230 figure in front of you also includes 100 slots that are being ramped up, meaning that St. Francis out in Columbus, I just use them for example because I was on a site visit with them recently. They have psychiatry residents that they are ramping up. So as they go through their growth and their becoming a fully mature program is probably what I should say, those slots will fill up. It just takes 2, 3, sometimes 4 years for these programs to achieve it. But they, from an airplane analogy, they have taken off. They're in the ascent pattern right now. So that's a good thing. And what this also includes is off cycles, this 230. And that is somebody's in training, something happens, they need to take time off, they will come back. But that does include some of those openings there. And then what I did do is the figures, the next 3 numbers you'll see is 150 slots vacant at Emory. That is across the full fleet of all their specialties, residencies, fellowships, but that is a fully baked number. That is an organizational decision. I wouldn't be able to opine on most of those, if not all of them. The same thing with MCG. There's about 75 slots open. I do know within pediatrics, just off of what's reported through some websites, there's about 20 slots contributing to the 75 at MCG. Again, I don't know the why. I just know the figure. And then the 33 slots with the non-civilian federal program sitting in the state of Georgia. And then finally, a total opening of about 400 slots. Again, it's fluid. This could go a little up. It could go a little down. Depends on when you're pulling the figures. But that's kind of the high level of open GME here today in Georgia. Having been the bearer of what's open, I also want to say thank you to everybody. You have done a lot of good work. This is stats from FY13. Since then, through all the great efforts of everybody here in the state of Georgia, I was living in Texas at the time, so I can't take any credit, but I can stand here and tell you that y'all did a great job. You've brought online 15 new hospitals. You've brought on 39 new GME programs. You've brought online almost 1,000 new slots. That's a lot of good work in just a little bit over a decade, so thank you. This is not an overnight process. GME takes 2 to 5 years to kind of get out the gate. It depends, and there's no exact number because one GME program at one institution will have a different plan forward or a different route forward than another one, even if it's of the same specialty. You very well could have one organization, for whatever reason, have a problem in recruiting a program director. I'm just going to pick on that. That's the physician, he or she's in charge. They're the person in charge of that GME program, say a family practice program director. You need to find a physician who wants to do it. Find a physician who probably has experience in it. Find a physician who's interested in academic medicine, because they all aren't, to be quite frank with you. And they want to be in that community wherever this GME opportunity is. So there's a lot of things that have to line up, and these are physicians who all probably have 15 more jobs waiting for them if they really want to go look for one. These are highly sought after people in any specialty. So that's the timeline. That's the steps, what you'll see on the right-hand side. It's a cultural change. It's an operational change. They obviously have to get it's not regulatory, but they have to get accreditation done from ACGME, not just at the institutional level, but also at the program level. So there's a lot going on. And really with the difference between what I tell people is when you're building a road or a highway, like where you live, you drive by it every day and you're like, oh man, I wish it could be done quicker. It's taken 4 years to finish that road, but you see progress. Unfortunately with GME, you're not going to see it except for the handful of people who are working on it every day. So that it's kind of, it's invisible progress, but it's happening, but it takes a minute. So Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce, we operate residency capitation funds for a variety of hospitals around the state, about 30, and funding for about 2,400 slots roll through our agency. Again, it's a fluid figure because some of the funding that we administer depends on if they actually have residents, the way the contracts work in those seats. If you don't have a resident in that seat, we're not going to pay you. And so that's kind of how that works. And then if they do have it, then of course then we start administering the funds. There's reporting requirements and there's data submission requirements. But what you'll see is at a high level, we have about 2,400 GME slots that we administer funds for. And then 1,300 of those, again, all those seats have to be filled, are in the primary care lanes. Now it's the same specialties I listed a moment ago, but there is neurology you will see added. Neurology was a program that did get funding added for at Morehouse, actually just out of this past legislative session and budget year. So that's where that addition came from. And then the statistic on the bottom of this slide is I really want to pay attention to for a minute is PGY1. So that's first year resident. It's regardless of what specialty, internal medicine, pediatrics, neurosurgery, ENT, it doesn't matter what type of doctor you want to become. You got to be a first year. You're a freshman, basically. There's 950 of those here in Georgia, about. Again, the residency has to be filled, so plus or minus. However, there are 110 transitional years. And I don't know if everyone knows what transitional year is, so I want to make sure you understand. That is a physician who has going on to a specialty, radiology this applies to, dermatology this applies to, ophthalmology, ENT. Those are the main ones. And I'm married to a physician who did this, so I've lived it in real life. They do 1 year at a transitional year program. They might stay at that institution. It could be that, hypothetically, they do 1 year at Emory at transitional year. They stay at Emory and become an ophthalmologist. They work in Atlanta. Great. They could do 1 year at Emory, go out of state somewhere. We don't know if they come back. The point is, it's a 1 year commitment. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. And it's 110 of them. It's a decent percentage. This is just a sampling of the programs that it's not an inclusive list, but it's just a sampling. The goal is really just to show that we work with almost every hospital that has GME here in the state. Funds are appropriated. We are more than happy to administer. We view ourselves as a collaborative agency that wants these hospitals to succeed in the funds that they are receiving from us. So if the list gets added, then that's great, but we want to work with everybody in a collaborative manner. What I'm going to do on the next couple slides is transition a little bit to get a little data heavy now, a little more stats. This slide is a little bit dated, but the good thing is that it's retrospective, so we know that it to a high degree of accuracy, the stats are good. It's not, well, I think this state has got this going on this year, so this is why I did it that way. But what you will see, I would point your attention to the fourth column with the numbers. So that would be residents per 100,000 population. That's GME. And what you will see, I've listed a variety of states, some geographically near us, others maybe comparably sized. But these are all states that probably house a lot of GME as well. Similar makeup, different makeup. It's just a way in terms of how the states are, but it's just a nice diverse basket of states. But basically what I'm trying to point out here is you'll see Georgia is the lowest from a GME per 100,000 population. Now, others might point out figures from other states. I left them off, like New York and Massachusetts. Their numbers are extremely high. The one consideration I would say when people start talking about those states is that those states also house institutions that are functioning there to train physicians, not just from around the country, but around the world. They do have a different, I'm not saying that we don't do that, but I do think you have more institutions that they're focused. I think the Georgia institutions, some maybe are more focused here in Georgia. So that's where you do see maybe a little bit of the dichotomy in the figures, but these are states that are largely similar to us size, scope, but unfortunately the per 100 count is a little bit lower. So just a statistic. And then also statistics. I don't expect anybody to be able to read these numbers. If you can, you're a genius, and that's great. The goal was just to present to you this online dashboard that we have put on. This is actually the same dashboard again that we won the award for from the State Chief Information Officers, and GDAC has been wonderful to partner with on this. If you see orange, the more orange it is, the more not the more or less, the less physicians you have in that county. If you see yellow, you're getting better. And then as it heads towards dark blue, those are the more staffed or occupied counties. Now, this is all physicians. This is data we get straight from the medical board. We take their license renewal data, we scrub it, we clean it, we analyze it, we publish it. What you can do, and there's a link, so if you do have the file and it, from my slides, and if you don't, just go to the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce website, and there is a link to data on the top right. You can slice and dice this by any physician specialty you want. So if you're just curious on XYZ specialty, pediatrics, ENT, whatever it is, you can slice and dice it. If you want to see it for your area, that's fine. If you want to see an age distribution, you can see that. We have deliberately made this thing what I've been telling the board for the past year is when I started in 2022 and around June, is that our data was in a very 2D format, and my goal was to make everything in a 4D format, so that way it's accessible to everybody, and they can analyze it however they want to fulfill their mission, because we all are here together to serve Georgians. With that, that is actually brings me to my final slide. Well, one more would be my final, and I was asked to provide some recommendations, and I have a few. And what I will do is I'll just read those out, and then at that point I'd be glad to entertain any questions that anyone has. And the first is long-term startup grants for net new GME native sites with end dates and Georgia UME graduate minimums. What does that mean? That means that we do currently operate startup grants, developmental grants. So we do both, but perhaps consider something where XYZ institution gets funds for a certain amount of finite amount of years, finite amount of money, and that we could perhaps put in some thresholds where they would be required to have a certain amount of Georgia medical school or Georgia UME graduate rate fulfill those slots. Because what we do know is if somebody did medical school in Georgia and did residency in Georgia, their propensity to stay in the state is at about 50 to 60%. If you tail it back all the way to high school, that propensity to stay in Georgia goes up to about 75 or 80%. So perhaps tying that into some minimums in terms of Georgia graduates. Not all the Georgia programs fully, residency programs fully match to Georgia medical school graduates. In fact, and if you remember an earlier slide, only about a third really stay in Georgia. So you've got a decent amount of people that you could still pull. And it's not, it is, the match process is, it's a two-way street. People have to rank each other, but this could perhaps incentivize the schools. The second one, recommendation is focus on current GME sites that are above their CMS cap and filled to their current AC GME complement, who increase their complement, consider an in-state rate and a lower out-of-state rate, therefore retaining more Georgia UME graduates. So what that really means is all residency programs are limited to what they call the CMS cap. That is dictated by CMS. It's a formula based on how they ramp up over the first 5 years with residencies, and they're stuck. So your older programs are stuck from literally a number from the mid-1990s. Your newer programs can try to get higher, but there's only so much that someone can flex up operationally and still provide excellent clinical care. And then some programs have decided, okay, my cap with CMS, I'm just being hypothetical with y'all, is 10 residents, but I want to run a ACGME complement. That's the terminology of the accrediting body for all residencies here in the States, is 12. So I'm going to run 12. That's fine. I don't get the funding for 2 from CMS because it's the 2 above the CMS cap of 10. And maybe this recommendation, if something were to occur on it, that this 12 now could turn into 15. where the funding could assist those three aggregates and perhaps tie it in again to having Georgia residents or Georgia UME graduates take those slots. And then last but not least is focus on core and primary specialties, and that's emergency med, gen surge, IM, family med, peds, OB-GYN, and psych. And those are really the bread and butter specialties that do your blocking and tackling in all your communities throughout Georgia. Do you need a transplant hepatologist? Of course, you need multiple ones, but do they need to be everywhere in Georgia? Probably not. Do you need pediatricians and family medicine and internal medicine doctors in all over Georgia? Of course you do. So let's focus on those who can provide good care in the communities so people don't have to drive. Allow them to assess, triage, and then coordinate if you need some sort of quaternary care like the transplant hepatologist. So those are my three recommendations for you all. Appreciate you listening to me, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chet. You've provided us with some great information there. The issue that we have in Southwest Georgia is that to have these individuals in place, we have to transport them 50-something miles. And it's a back and forth type situation. And we've just learned that the doctors that are associated with our nursing homes are faced with the nursing homes in Southwest Georgia closing. We're about to see nursing homes close in Southwest Georgia and probably throughout the state because of a federal mandate that is being placed on them in regard to the nursing. What do y'all do in working with the federal government on issues like this?
In that regards, specific to this question, we don't, because that is a federal mandate for nursing homes, and my knowledge of it is what I've read is that they have certain staffing minimums. I think that's what you're referring to, but we don't get involved with staffing requirements or anything because that is not within the purview of the Healthcare Workforce Board.
Another issue that Southwest Georgia is faced with now is doctors in the with optometry. In the next couple of years, we will have in Albany alone the loss of 16 optometrists by retirement, by not going into that field. And I know that our numbers that we graduate is based on a contract with Nashville and Birmingham. And that number has gone down, and I'm looking at our chairman over there. That number has gone down. That is going to lead to another crisis that what can we do there?
Well, currently, let me state that Healthcare Workforce Board does not interface with the Board of Optometry for data assessment. We would be glad to do an analysis. Optometrists do provide extremely valuable work in their communities in providing basic eye care and screenings for individuals, and perhaps can catch things early that otherwise would become medically complicated. But at the moment, we just haven't received any data historically from the Board of Optometry, but we would be glad to engage with them should they be willing to share that with us.
Well, you're about to receive it because they're coming to our next next meetings on that. Thank you so much. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm aware that Terry England and Butch Parrish have done a remarkable job in providing additional monies for adding more residency slots for the state. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I also recognize that of this last slide that you put up, one of the recommendations, I read it 3 times, and I swear I still don't know what it means. But let me put the question in something that I can understand, and Tarvin can as well. So I had to do it. You threw me under the bus. So one of the slides I picked up on was there's 950 first-year residency slots. How many graduates do we have from medical school in the state of Georgia?
How many graduates from that? I made 735 is what the stat said. Yep, 735 in the most recent medical school graduate round in
Okay.
Georgia.
In Georgia. But a lot of our Georgia graduates wind up in another state doing the residency.
It looks like 31% stay in Georgia, and yes, to your point, the rest leave.
Okay, so the question I have is, are there better incentives in other states? I can't imagine if you went to medical school in the great state of Georgia and you saw the wonderful things that we have in the great state of Georgia and the wonderful people and the great legislators, there has to be a reason that they're going to other states. Is it incentive-based? Is it just to expand their horizon? Have you done research in polling or doing surveys to find out is what we're offering inadequate, even if we're adding more slots? And thank you for that. If we're adding more slots and we're still losing 2/3 of our graduates to somewhere else that might get married in another state and then they're going to stay there, is there something fundamental that we should change in our program to continue to attract more of the great graduates of the institutions that we pay a lot of money to these schools to educate them, and they're going to Tennessee?
It's a good point and a good takeaway on your part. So there's unfortunately no silver bullet at the moment, but what I can tell you from your polling and surveying question, so we annually do what we call the Graduate Medical Education Survey. We survey every GME program that we administer funds to. So it's enough of a sample, a large sample, where we feel like we've talked to a lot of people. Historically, as I mentioned, I was talking about how we had 2D survey and we were moving towards a 4D experience. This would be our first year in administering this new, more robust one. Actually, that data is being worked on right now, and I will actually have that data for y'all right before the session begins. We actually are hoping to present that at our November board meeting. It's just being cleaned and processed right now. So we do have questions in there that talk about why are you leaving Georgia, and tell us more, and do you feel like the Georgia residencies are of equal caliber to a different state? And is it personal? Is it professional? Like, why are you leaving? So we will have that information. I just don't have it today because it's literally being worked on.
Because that really is the crux of the question that I'm trying to get at is, I don't care how many residencies that we continue to fill, if our people are not going to them, and it's our people that went to school here that are graduating from here, that if they're going to North Carolina or Tennessee or Florida, chances are we're not getting them back. And we've made a significant investment in the educational opportunities of these students. And if there's something that we can do, then by George, we ought to.
Agree, and that's why in the recommendations I was saying consider stuff with a certain threshold with Georgia UME. So that way a program could go and, if this were all to come to life, a program could have additional, hypothetically, 4 slots, but it would be perhaps with Georgia UME graduates, because we know that if they do medical school and residency here, the propensity, we can't make someone stay here, but the likelihood of them staying would be higher.
Could you add a asterisk to one of your surveys that you're going to provide information, and perhaps other states might credential quicker than what we do based on the last?
We could weave that into the 25 survey, because this one was administered, I believe, April, May, June, July of this year. So it took us a few minutes to get the data collected.
Chair Lady Darlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about the same thing, just much simpler. Why is Mississippi beating us? And that's kind of where I'm at. Of all places, Mississippi, I can't imagine they're offering more. Can we pay for and do more slots on our own? The state, can they fund additional slots? I know it's very expensive.
I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, if the state chose to provide funding for GME sites to increase their complement, and the sites wanted to engage, then they would apply to ACGME and put in for there's some requirements that the programs have to do it, but they know how to do it, and they can increase their complement. And then at that point, you could have more residents here, if I understood your question properly.
Yeah, that's really what it is. That is a big stumbling block. We're all seeing it. We are making major investments in this state. We want to build the medical community. We're just looking for ways to keep them here. And whatever the incentives is, we need to look at it. It's quite expensive. We understand that. And it, particularly in rural communities and underserved areas, that might be an answer to some of it. But thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Chairman Butch Parrish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a statement and then ask a question, if that's okay. First of all, I want to thank this House. The House, in my mind, has been the leader over the years in working on these problems that we're talking about today. More residency slot, more doctors, more keeping them in the state, and everything else. A couple of things. A quick answer to the question that you had about what are we going to do about keeping optometrists in this state. You know, if we had an optometry school in this state, it'd be a lot easier because we don't have one now. They're going out of state. So that's just a quick answer to that. You brought it up about your surveys, and I've got sort of a question for you. I know y'all send those out, but I don't think you really have a way to enforce that those surveys come back to you, I don't think, do you? Or I know you're working on that. Have you been able to get better responses? And I'll tell you why I want to ask that.
We do now, actually. So one change that we made this past year is there is a certain threshold that each program has to achieve for response rate. If not, then there are reductions that they would face in their payments from us.
Good.
And everyone came up to bat and swung pretty hard.
Great. Well, we thought there was a way to improve that. Thank you for doing that. One of the questions I have been told is that you look at a particular county, and especially in rural Georgia, there may be a listing of 10 physicians in that county, but if you go and try to interview those 10, maybe only 2 are actively engaged. There might be 10 living there, but they're retired or they're not working or something. On the number that you show, is there a difference, or do you designate who's actually practicing, or just the total number that are supposedly there?
That's an excellent call out, so thank you. We are showing raw number. We don't have the ability today with the data available to show a kind of a net effective FTE. We would like to get there, but just not there today.
The numbers that we're getting could give us an inflated look, but if we could do a better job of really digging into that data and say, you got 10 doctors there, but actually only 2 of them are working. So really 2 is the right number more so than the 10. So I think if we can continue to work on that, I think that'll improve. Thank you for the good job you're doing. He's only been on the job over there a couple of years, but they've made a tremendous amount of progress in what they're doing, and this House has been a leader in trying to give him the resources that he needs to do the kind of job we want him to do. So thank you to you and your board for doing that.
Thank you.
Well, Chet, that's the last of the questions there. Thank you so much for coming, sharing that, and I know that we'll be hearing from you as we prepare, or we will be reaching out to you as we prepare our summaries and recommendations on that. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for speaking up on those issues there. Thank you so much. We will now bring up an old friend, Jimmy Lewis, who's CEO of Hometown Health, and Jimmy will bring us some of the things that you see on your before you now on the Rural Development Council handout that he has provided for us. Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
That's my mama's son. She said he was a good boy, but that was debatable. My name is Jimmy Lewis, and I think it's important to kind of share with you a little bit about who I am and what we're about to talk about. I formed Hometown Health 25 years ago. We're celebrating our 25th year in about a month. It was formed for the purpose of doing whatever it takes to keep a rural hospital open and going. And the reason it was formed like that is because I'm from Cordele. And if you hadn't been, Cordele has some rather suburban areas, and I'm from Pena outside of Cordele, so you would know that that's truly rural. I have family there, and we've had a lot of issues with our family from a health standpoint. And I had an opportunity in the business world to do some wild and crazy things. I served on 6 executive committees in the Fortune 500 world before I bought a company back in Albany, Georgia. It was Cross Equipment Company, and we manufactured farm equipment. And one of the things that was interesting about what we did there is we had the opportunity to introduce GPS into spraying. And that was pretty major at the time, and it's pretty major now. We continued to do those kind of things. I served on the board of a hospital, Palmyra, and then I served in a number of other functions. And all of that led to an understanding of the problem in rural health care. I'm an engineer by trade, process engineer by trade, but I worked in the big area of process improvement. And when I was on the board, I could see so many problems that were just absolutely unbelievable. So I had the opportunity to sell my company to Gold Kist, went on from there to board and all sorts of other things. That led to the formation and the development of Hometown Health, and we have a very simple purpose. Do whatever it takes legally, morally, and ethically to keep a rural hospital from closing. And that's been pretty wild and crazy because, and I'm going to not so much speak on this, I'll try it. Yes. From the time we started this until now, there have been at least 16 rural hospitals to close in the state of Georgia. You often see 9 and 10. I go back to the beginning when I started this whole gizmo, and there are about 16 of them. There's an interesting thing that occurs by this, and I think it's extremely important to note, and that is of the 16 that closed, not one of them reopened. So you must understand that when we close one, we're closing an economic development chapter in that community that does not recover. I want to share with you today, though, some of the issues that are really important for you to consider and the whole room to consider based on some things that you may or may not be aware about. This is the group of the 16, and they're just all sorts of stories. I sat in on the community closures for most of them. And it's incredible to watch a community cry. But when a hospital closes, it cries. And that's a major problem. This is some of the challenges, and I can go through all of this, but I want to go down to the bottom and tell you that the advances in technology require, and it's important to understand this from the start, we've got internet capability issues, we've got capital sourcing issues, we've got trained technician issues, and then we've got proper claims issues. Those are some of the things that I'm about to talk about. This is, you can't read it all, and I understand that, but this is a simulation model that we developed so we can determine the probability of success of a rural hospital and the profitability. The important thing to note here is over on the right-hand corner, in this particular model development, which is an actual hospital, the best it can do with this pair mix is 92 cents on the dollar. Think about it. How often do you get to run a $20 or $30 million operation with 20 or 92 cents on the dollar, which means that you're going to lose 8 cents on the dollar every way you start? That's a genuine and real problem. So the question is, how did we get there? In 1999, there was a decision made at that time based on an economic problem in the state of Georgia to cut Medicaid to 85.6% of cost. We cut it to 85.6% of cost and never did replenish it. So we've operated for nearly 30 years with this kind of loss. And the way we have operated is we found all sorts of incredible creative ways to produce enough money to make payroll. Make payroll. What a novel thought. Give you a day in the life of Jimmy in the last 6 weeks. In the last 6 weeks, I've had I think it's probably 6 phone calls, usually on a Monday or maybe a Tuesday. And the call goes like this. Jimmy, I got a problem. This is a CEO. I got a problem. I got a real problem. Okay, what's the problem? I mean, I understand we got a problem. No, I got a problem. Tuesday. The problem is I don't have any cash. This is a $20, $25 million operation. I don't have any cash. That's a problem. Yeah, that's a real problem. And oh, by the way, payroll is Thursday. What am I going to do? So we go to work to try to find a way to produce payroll dollars. In that particular case, I said, what are your sources? I've used all of my sources up. What do? And I said, you got to get creative and you got to think out of the box. And one of the ways you can think out of the box is how much money are you owed in DISH or UPL? And for those of you who know that, that's money that comes in to compensate for what you didn't get paid earlier. So the question was, so what's the big deal about that? Well, there's a letter that says that you will be getting X amount of money on a certain date, and that money is not here yet. Oh, by the way, that's a separate issue because slow pay on the part of the state and the federal government is awful. You can't run a business without money. And they say, oh, we'll give you the money, but we won't give you the money. And that's the case here. So he said, I got $800,000, $900,000 that are coming. I can't get to it and I can't make payroll. I said, it's real simple. You take the letterhead on the letter that you got, and you put it on your letterhead, and you carry it to your little bank and say, I want to offer this document as collateral for whatever I can need to get my payroll. They ain't gonna do that. I said, have you tried it? No, so he did. Tried it, went to his bank, and carried it in and laid the document up there and said, can you advance me that amount of money using that as collateral? And he said, well, sure. Having not asked the question, he didn't get the answer. He asked the question, he got the answer, and the money came within the 24 hours that he needed to make payroll. He made payroll. Shortly thereafter, we had another issue that occurred. And the other issue that occurred was I can't make payroll. I got a problem and I can't get the cash and I can't make payroll. Now, I'm building you a story that you need to really put together because this is fixing to be devastating. So he said, okay, I'll just do what I need to do with my local bank. So he put his little gizmo together and he carried it down to his local bank and said, I need some money. And I need money for payroll and I need to use this as collateral. Guy on the other side of the bank says, we don't do that anymore. We have decided that as banks, we don't loan money to hospitals. Now, wait a minute. What kind of, you got a guaranteed collateral here and you don't want to make money, make a payment here so this dude can survive? No. So what do I do? What do I do? We got creative and we said, okay, we got to find a way to get money here. And we got to find a way to get money in short order. And for those of you who know Jason Bearden over at CareSource, anybody know Jason Bearden? President of CareSource in Georgia. Jason runs that insurance company. It's a private not-for-profit. I said, call Jason, tell Jason that you need money to make payroll and you need it within 24 hours and see what he can do. How much do you need? I need somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 to make payroll. Oh, really? So we made the phone call to Jason. Jason said, what are you talking about? And I said, you're a private not-for-profit. We need money. This is a community investment on your part. Can you help us do this? We talked about it, and this was in about the 10 or 11 o'clock time frame. We talked about it, how to get it done. And he said, as crazy as that sounds, I believe I can make that work. I said, can you do it in less than 24 hours? And he said, I believe I can make that work. He called his people at the corporate level. They got on it, and indeed they did make it work. They found a way to get an advance against that document, the DISH document, to make payroll. Now, that's pretty heavy because to move from zero, it's kind of like, those 67 Chevrolets that we used to have. To go from 0 to 60 is pretty strong, and that was 0 to 60, and that was pretty strong. So that's what we did to make that particular payroll. Jason did that, and Jason came back and said, well, I tell you what, is this a frequent occurrence? Yeah, this happens on a regular basis. Well, what happens if we set up a reserve pot against which rural hospitals can draw from if they got this situation since we can't get it from the state? They did that, set up a $5 million pot, and now that's one way that we make payroll. Interestingly enough, we got another one, had another call that was shortly thereafter, and the same kind of situation was we can't make payroll. And this seems to occur within a 24 to 48 hour basis. We can't make payroll, what do we do? So we went through all the steps. We checked this one off and no, this one off and no, this one off and no. And to your southwest Georgia area, Chairman, we came up with the obvious notion that, how about a bank? Well, the bank said no. Well, we have a relationship through another project that I'll mention in a minute that was a bank, that was a friendly bank. And we took this particular need and we went over 100 miles south of this particular bank, this particular hospital to your community. And we said, Mr. or Lady CEO, we need some help. And the Lady CEO said, well, we all know where we can get some help if it's to be gotten. And where is that? Well, let's go to my banker. So we go to her banker and say, we got a payroll problem. Mr. Banker, can you help us? And here's the collateral. This banker is a risk-friendly banker. He knows what it's about because he loans a lot of money to a lot of big farmers. So he understands risk. We laid it all out to him. He looked at it and he said, what's the problem? Well, the problem is we've had notices from banks that we won't do anything. No problem. I can handle that, and I can handle that on an ongoing basis. So we went 100 miles away from the hospital system to get enough money to make payroll. I tell you those stories to say this is typical. This is not atypical. This is where we've come to. We've come to a situation where we can't get cash on a timely basis. It's an AR that sits out there and we can't get to it until we find somebody that we can work through it. That ain't the way to run a railroad. This is a terrible situation, and we're going to run into a situation probably soon where this is going to lead to another major problem, Mr. Chairman, that we talked about. Chairman and I had the opportunity to sit through an interesting situation in a rural hospital in Arlington, Georgia called Calhoun County Hospital, and it had a strange phenomenon to occur. They ran out of money. They knew they were going to run out of money, but they really ran out of money, and they ran out of money on Monday. And then everybody was going crazy. I was with them. We spent a lot of time, Chairman. We did all sorts of crazy things. You know what happened on Thursday? The hospital went insolvent. Anybody ever heard of a hospital going insolvent? If so, what happens? You need to understand that when a hospital goes insolvent, it's not bankrupt. Rural hospitals, not-for-profits, can't go bankrupt. If they can't go bankrupt, they've got to do something. So what they do is they become insolvent. And the definition of insolvent says, as was in that case, we got a situation where on Thursday we run out of money, we quit seeing patients, but guess what? The hospital continues to have to operate for 10 years because the lag against payments is still there and it never goes away. We're in a situation now where, because of slow payments for the state and the federal government, we're looking at a situation where we could have 6 or 8 or 10 hospitals that can become insolvent because of this very similar situation. And it happens, if you really want to know how it happens, you can go look at what happened in McRae. Anybody ever drive through McRae? If you drive through McRae, look at that hospital that's over there that's closed. Okay, that hospital closed as a result of a notion where it ran out of money. They had a board meeting on Monday morning or on Monday afternoon, planned out the board meeting of how it would work and get approvals, went to the board meeting, and one representative stood up in the back and said, I'd like to make a note that my clients don't agree with this particular approach to get this money, so we're not going to vote to do it, and they didn't. The hospital closed on Thursday, and there was 1,000 people put out of work. It happens, and we are genuinely getting close to it. Now, the further part of that is that you need to know, and I can go into all sorts of these kind of things, but the further part of what you need to know is this. We have a situation in the state of Georgia where we may be forcing the insolvency of a number of small rural hospitals. Now, this is not every rural hospital, but this is those small hospitals that are small, that are private or small or not-for-profits, and they're sitting standalone and independent. So one of the other payrolls that we almost missed a little earlier was an interesting situation where the guy calls up and says, I can't make payroll again. This is a crazy situation. I can't. I said, what is the problem? You want to hold on to your chair for this one. The problem is that in the state of Georgia, we've got rural hospitals who have $400,000, $500,000, $700,000 in AR for prison services rendered for which there is no payment. Anybody get that? We have paid out as a state, so the story goes, millions of dollars to somebody where the money went somewhere, and the provider of service is the rural hospital, and that goes to an AR that is unserviceable. We have a situation, so the story is that we've got millions of dollars that were paid to a provider of service. The money was paid, and that provider of service did not pay the hospitals. And the hospitals are sitting now with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $700,000 in AR that they can't get payment for. They can't make payroll. They got to go to a bank 100 miles down the road because WellPath did not pay. When we mentioned this whole subject matter, and I learned about the details of this some months ago, when I got in and started asking questions, strange and interesting questions or comments start to occur. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, said the legislator. We got to look at something that's going on here that is catastrophically bad for the infrastructure. Now, I appreciate all of what's been said this morning from a clinical standpoint, but you got to understand we've got a problem in a non-clinical situation relative to healthcare, and there's a very good possibility that the healthcare infrastructure in the rural part of the state of Georgia is collapsing. And it's collapsing for a whole bunch of other reasons that I'll talk about. the least of which is Jimmy doesn't know how to do this. These are the other normal problems. But problem at the policy level, I'm telling you, we're looking at not every hospital. The smallest hospitals on the list are the ones that are most vulnerable, but they're also the ones that, in his territory over here, represent a major problem. So these are problems. What are some of the solutions? And this is interestingly, you don't normally think about this in these terms. For rural hospitals, we are looking at a financial infrastructural problem that this lady right here heard me talk about last week. We got solutions. We know where one major solution is. And one major solution is telemedicine and telehealth and the use of telemedicine and telehealth and what it can do to offset the workforce shortage. The only problem is, like those other things, we can't get to decision makers to get something solved, to consolidate, to produce, to work, to save money with telemedicine. Now, what we need to look at here is we got a situation where we got capital in, you don't only think about this, only crazy people that might worry about this kind of stuff like me, but you got to understand that the healthcare situation is based on a capital structure that is extremely tenuous. And that capital structure means that if we can't get it from a tax situation, and if we can't get it from a county subsidy, and we can't get it from then we're out of money, and it's all a part of the capital. And then if we don't have capital to support the ongoing operation, we got a problem where we can lose a hospital because of the lack of capital. Interestingly, with the lack of capital, we had a situation to the Dr. Bridges standpoint. We had a hospital that closed. Now, get this now. We had a hospital that closed on the Thursday, or not closed, came to a near closure on a Thursday night, and I got a phone call that says, I got a particular but beats the hell out of me. I mean, I'm not normally in the oxygen business. So we got to work and call the man in the back in the blue back there. And I said, Dr. Bridges, we got a strange problem here. We need to find somebody to have the ability to do that. Can't do it. Dr. Bridges got on the phone and went to somewhere